Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, Geoff Currier, and Royce Koop, where we break down the stories shaping our country.
Let's talk about something local here in Winnipeg. Let's talk about, Geoff, you had brought this up in our kind of pre-discussion about the mayor of Winnipeg wanting to spend more money and hire someone that can, I really don't know what their role would be, to be
Well,
honest.
I guess it's to create a position to oversee public safety. Now, I don't think the citizens of Winnipeg are crying that their number one priority is another bureaucrat. I'm pretty sure that that's not the number one priority for most Winnipeggers. Secondly, isn't that what the chief of police is about? Isn't that we just hired a new chief of police? Isn't public safety the responsibility of the Winnipeg Police Service and the Winnipeg Police Board? And Kevin,
Well,
you were on the board. Isn't that the job of the board and the chief of police?
I was the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board, and that is their sole responsibility. They are to be, having those meetings. They are to be having those discussions publicly. How many public meetings do they go out and talk about this? I think this was more about, for some reason, information sharing, and thought that this would be, a position, you're right, that a bureaucrat could solve, but they can't. I mean,
Well,
Royce,
information sharing with who?
exactly. And legally, how are you going to do that? I can tell you, as being the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board, there's lots of issues around that, right? The mayor is not supposed to be involved with the police on a day-to-day basis. That's the role of the police board. That's why they spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars on that board. But now you have the mayor sitting on it and playing that as, well, I'm doing this for a political reason. And then you've got the deputy mayor sitting on that as the chair. To me, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you right now. I am shocked that the Justice Minister of Manitoba or the Manitoba Police Commission hasn't come out and said, hey, hang on a second. You cannot have the deputy mayor, who has to act as the mayor at times, be the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board. That to me is unthinkable, but nobody is talking about it. And you're right. Now we're going to spend what, 180 grand? 190, and then he's got to get an assistant, then they got to have an office, then they got to have a budget.
At least one assistant.
Yeah, at least one. They'll probably have a couple to do what? To hold meetings, and then we're going to have to pay for the meetings. We're going to have to buy sandwiches. We're going to have to buy coffee. Meanwhile, people are still going to get attacked on buses, and crime will still happen.
Yeah. Royce, again, are we crying? Are we begging City Hall for another bureaucrat?
Yeah, I don't know very much about this. I mean, it might be that the justice minister does intervene, like, so quietly, or later on down the line. It is the case that politicians, appointing a commission to investigate something, appointing someone to a new position. So lots of ways that politicians can make it look like they're taking action without really taking action. But when it comes to these crime issues, we know what action looks like. Winnipeggers know what needs to be done. It's probably not this.
So I like that you mentioned that. This is exactly, I think, a great example of just a politician trying to make it look like they're doing something to address crime. And as Geoff said, nobody is asking for more bureaucrats. They're asking for safer streets. And I don't know how sharing information, I know they're going to try to play it up, but I was there. I sat there. I know what goes on behind those closed doors. There's not the information sharing that you can do. I mean, there's laws around that type of stuff, and there's all kinds of other rules and regulations that have to be followed. But it really does seem to me that here we are again in Manitoba and at the city of Winnipeg, just spending money after crying and crying and crying that we don't have enough money, and we had to have record increases on fees and taxes and everything. And we're taping on a Friday, and for people that might be watching it from afar, we got hit with a massive snowstorm here in Winnipeg, and they didn't even plow the streets. And in fact, I'll let you know this. I heard from a couple of people who work for Public Works and one of the contractors that clears for the city didn't even reach out to the contractors until this morning. And how many accidents have happened this morning in the city of Winnipeg, all in the name of saving money?
Well, I think they were probably hoping that the snow wouldn't be that severe, because sometimes Winnipeg doesn't get hit with the big brunt of the snowstorm. They were probably hoping that we would escape most of it, and that all of a sudden the temperature would rise. Well, neither one of those best case scenarios played out, because we got a lot of snow, and it's not going to melt in the next couple of days.
However, if we follow Royce's, methodology here for politicians, maybe they could come out and say, well, we didn't clear the streets because we thought that would cut down on crime. Criminals can't get from point A to point B very quickly. So, we've actually cut down on crime today because we didn't clear the streets.
That is an excellent argument. What effective crime studies make it so their getaway cars don't work.
That's right. They have the police helicopter, getaway cars can't get away. You can't get on a bus. Buses are getting stuck. Look what we did to stop crime. We are taking action today. It's probably going to happen now. I'm going to get anyways. I think it was a valid point for you to bring up, Geoff, and you're right about the bureaucrats. One final thing on the city I do want to talk about is the fourplexes and the Housing Accelerator Fund money. And I wanted to get Royce's opinion on this. It's still being discussed at City Hall. They're still talking about the money coming. And Gillingham did come out and say, well, Pierre Poilievre has said he wanted to build more houses, so we think the money's coming. Do governments, when they come in, not change all these policies pretty fast?
If Poilievre gets elected, he will. Housing is a major priority of his personally, is my understanding, also of the parties. I think this stuff will happen pretty quickly with a Poilievre government. Although now it's hard to say, now that Trump has turned everything upside down in this election campaign. But if I had to bet, yeah, I think that a conservative government would be moving pretty quickly on these issues. Poilievre is a kind of breed of politician, people that do things quickly at the start. Get the hard things done quickly, get it done in the first year or two of your mandate. And so I would expect to see those things happening quickly.
And Geoff, I want to ask you, because you've been involved in city politics and you've covered it for a very long time. Councillor Brian Mays had put out some information challenging Scott Gillingham and the city on American contracts that were going on and on about, not using American companies. And he noted that the North End treatment plant is to an American conglomerate, and we're not hearing the city talk about looking at other avenues or Canadian options, even though Canadian companies bid on that job. Do you think that this puts them in a difficult position, and should they be making that more of a talking point right now at council?
I think so. It's not something that the average Winnipegger probably pays a whole lot of attention to, but it's up to councillors other than Brian Mays to raise this profile a little bit, and it's up to the people who cover City Hall on a regular basis to ask those questions. All right, Your Worship, is it possible for us to shift some of these contracts? Is it possible for us to go Canadian on some of these contracts, to make that statement to the United States that, we love you, our American brothers and sisters, but more than 70 million of you just voted for a man who wants to destroy my country. What's our response?
Yep, very valid. And I want to finish on this one. We've got a column in the Winnipeg Sun on Saturday about what happened at City Council this past week. Council voted 14-2 to reduce the amount of time that people can speak to council. They felt people were going on too long. They felt that they needed to cut that down. So they've cut it from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. And I can tell you the reaction that I saw online and some reaction that I'm getting from emails, people are pretty upset about this.
And so they should be.
And they should be, right? That was my point, and that's what I wrote in the article. I thought that this was very at a time when governments need to be more accountable. It's like we're pushing people away. We're pushing them away, and I think one councillor, Charles or whatever, said, it's just storytelling. Royce, as a political scientist, again, what are your thoughts on this? Is this the right move to make by limiting the amount of time? Like, they can't even ask questions anymore. You can't ask questions at a council.
Yeah, I hate it. Thanks, I hate it. It's undemocratic. People should be allowed to speak, and politicians should welcome the voices of people that want to provide this kind of feedback and input. I will say that sometimes in these kinds of settings, it's not always the best barometer of what your constituents are thinking. You do get kind of interest groups. You get people that are really motivated, people that have the time, people that have the resources to come out. And so, but if you're a politician, you're smart enough to kind of see what's real and maybe what's this kind of mobilized special interest views. I also just think, and you're getting at this, Kevin, symbolically, it's just horrible. Cutting in half the amount of time that you can talk to your elected officials. Give me a break. It's supposed to be a democracy.
Well, I can tell you when I was on city council, and Geoff, you'll love this. I remember sitting there, and if a council meeting started to go past 4 o'clock, people started getting mad that they were there that long. So council meeting normally starts around 9:30, 10 o'clock, maybe. Take an hour and a half for lunch. They can come and go. They're on their computers. They're on their phone. None of them are paying attention because everything's already been decided behind closed doors. They're all going to vote a certain way. And they barely work during the week. They barely work all month. And all of a sudden, if they have to work more than 7 hours a day, it's the end of the world. My goodness.
Yeah, and Kevin, you know better than any of us here that being a city councilor can be as easy or as difficult a job as you want it to be. You essentially make your own hours and decide how hard you want to work. And some city councilors roll up their sleeves and put in a lot of hours and do a great deal of work. And then others, not so much. And there are some city councilors who just about need a Sherpa guide to find their office at City Hall.
I can tell you when I was in there, I used to go in every day. I'm not blowing smoke. Because I wanted to understand it, and I'm used to being in business and going to work every day. And I had some counselors come into me and ask me to stop because it was making them look bad. Because staff had mentioned that I was there. There were some counselors that I only saw once a month. I could walk through that building. I could set up a bowling alley in the hallways. Like, I mean, and I could have sold tickets and made a little extra money because people weren't there. You're absolutely right. You could either, it can be a job where you put in all the time or you don't put in any time, and then you continuously get reelected. But Royce, I am so happy to finally hear you take a strong stance on something. And say that you hate the fact that they cut the speaking, because it's people like you that, I think others respect your opinion and politicians listen to. They're not going to listen to me because they didn't like me when I was there. Why would they listen to me now? Because I always thought they were lazy. But you saying that that is wrong, I hope that resonates with them. I know they're trying to limit how long counselors can talk to a point too, because of course the members of the EPC and stuff, it didn't pass last night, but it'll come back. And again, there was comments made by some of the councillors like, you're just storytelling. We need to get to work. It's like, this is their job, period.
Yeah. Oh, people pay attention to you two a lot more than me, I would think. But I have some sympathy. Sometimes when you're at these consultations, you do get comments that aren't really helpful. They're not really constructive, and they go on and on. But this is the job. This is the people. It's a democracy. You should be listening. You're the one that ran for office. You're the one that wants the position. This is what it's about. It's hearing what's on the people's mind and letting, if people are upset about something, they have a right to be upset about it, and they should be able to say that.
Geoff, I want to give you the final word this week.
Well, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with Royce. In fact, I'd go beyond saying I hate it. I think it's disgraceful what City Council has done to shut down the Vox Populi on Main Street. I think it's disgraceful. They ought to be embarrassed that they have done that they have kneecapped the democratic process on Main Street.